Wednesday, September the 21st. I'm recording the history class lesson, and this is where we're starting with homework. I already checked today's homework, so if you notice in the book any A for absent or M for missing, and you're at home listening to this, make sure you correct that as soon as you come back. All right. I had told you guys that your homework this time was only going to have one lesson, even though it's a Wednesday. And the one lesson is the second part of the American Revolution. The second part of the American Revolution actually has fewer note cards than the first part did. So here is the beginning part of your homework. Now, we have a test in 1 week in this class. And because of that, homework over the weekend also includes preparing for the test. So there's a couple of ways I want you to do this. First of all, I want you to go ahead and do this homework tomorrow, let's say, unless you have a really good reason not to. But unless you're having a surgery or have something that's incapacitating you, go ahead and do this tomorrow. And then take a picture of your completed note cards. That means that you take all of your note cards, you just sort of spread them out, hold your camera above it, take a picture, flip them all upside down, take a picture of the back. So it should be 2 photos. Select those photos and email them to me. When you send them to me, I will send back to you a spreadsheet of all of the note cards. It will look like this. It will be all the questions and answers that are going to be on the test. You want that so you can double check and make sure you're studying the right things. All right. Speaking of studying the right things, also on your test is please study through your note cards at least 3 times. Study them front to back, study them back to front, spread them out, do whatever you need to do. Just use your note cards to help you study the material. The things that will be on the test will come from the note cards. They will not be exactly written the way the note cards are written, but anything that's on the test is on the note cards, with the exception of your discussion question, which I'll tell you about on Monday. They can be anything on the note cards, but they will not be material that is not on the note cards. The note cards are your framework for everything for the test. Yes, Joshua?
After we finish the test, can we throw away the note cards?
Yes, you can. Or leave them at home, or whatever you want to do, but you do not have to keep carrying them to school. We'll start a new set of note cards after the test. Any questions about the homework or the test that's coming up? Especially those of you who are new. Any questions about how this works? Okay. We are going to start today with a prayer that was from George Washington's journal. Now, I feel like he's the first president, founder of our country. We should honor that by standing up for this prayer. Rise to your feet, please. And I also want you guys to read this first part with me, all the way to Holy Protection. You can let me read this, and then I want you to read the very end with me. So track along with it as I'm reading the rest of it. But let's start. A prayer by George Washington to start our day today. Read with me. Almighty God, we make our earnest prayer that thou wilt keep the United States in thy holy protection. And then I'll read. That thou wilt incline the hearts of the citizens to cultivate a spirit of subordination and obedience to government, and entertain a brotherly affection and love for one another and for their fellow citizens of the United States at large. And finally, that thou wilt most graciously be pleased to dispose us all to do justice, to love mercy, and to demean ourselves with that charity, humility, and pacific temper of mind, which were the characteristics of the divine author of our blessed religion, without a humble imitation of whose example in these things we can never hope to be a happy nation. Read the end with me. Grant our supplication, we beseech thee, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. You can sit down. All right. George Washington's words from his journal. And it is time now for another map, because just about as soon as I hand back a map quiz, we get a new one. All right. Please, when you get this map, start to look at it, because this is Central America and the Caribbean. Pass that around. Central America and the Caribbean. Look.
That's cool. I thought the Caribbean was like always. Yeah, there's far in the menu.
All right, for this newest map, I want you to look at your map, which is marked with numbers that correspond to the things that are here on the bottom. But some of these you probably already know. Like, you probably know this is Mexico.
I did not know it really did.
You might have known that this large country is the United States. But you might not know all of these small countries in Central America. They're roughly on this particular map in order, though when you get to the quiz, it's not going to be quite so ordered. But this is Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador. So Belize and El Salvador are both small nations. Honduras, right here. Nicaragua is a larger country right here. Costa Rica is right here, and Panama right here. So I'm gonna pause. I hope to get a chance to show you some pictures, tell you more about these countries later on. We just really need to stay focused on the Revolutionary War today. But let me tell you really quickly about Panama. Do you have that?
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you watch the Little League World Series, a lot of teams come from around there.
Oh, from Central America.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Then yeah, it'd be awesome if you actually know where they are. Panama is the country that has the skinniest, I'll say like the skinniest part of land, right? So when explorers were trying to figure out how to get to Asia, they could not get through here because there's land in the way. They kept running into land. There's no place where there's a river or anything that cuts through where you could put a boat and then go through to this is Pacific, go through to the Pacific Ocean and then go on to China or Japan or something like that. But later on, in order to encourage trade, right here in Panama, at the skinniest part of land was built something that would allow boats to go through. What is it called?
Panama Canal.
The Panama Canal. Does anybody know how long the Panama Canal is? You're guessing 5 miles? Any other guesses? Skinniest part of land. How long would they have to make this canal?
60 miles.
60. Those are good guesses. Yeah. No, it's 100 miles long. So even at the skinniest part of land, it's still 100 miles across. So it's a pretty huge project to build a canal deep enough for big boats to go through, that you can get boats all the way that are ocean worthy all the way through to the Pacific Ocean. Like boats sturdy enough that they can do that. But it would also be a big deal to like take all your stuff off a boat and then to hike it over 100 miles and put it back on another boat. That's why they found the trade routes that went down beneath South America. Make sense? The Panama Canal has been a source of political conflict for a long time. And I'm telling you this from my own experience. I know this because when I was a little kid, my parents had a bumper sticker, not stuck to their car, it was just stuck on some piece of furniture in our basement, that said, "Keep the Panama Canal, give Carter away." So Carter was the president, Jimmy Carter. He was the president at the time. And what he was in the middle of doing when I was a little kid and he was president, he was in the middle of giving the Panama Canal back to the Panamanians, the people whose country it was, in order to control it, because America had been controlling it for a really long time. We'll get to this when we talk about modern politics, but the fear was that the Panamanians might have been communist, and they might hate the Americans, and they might not let us use it. And there was just a lot of fear of giving them their own control over that particular land. So it did not end up becoming anything huge, but I know it was a big deal when Carter decided that we were going to give it back to the Panamanians. All right, that's Panama. Now, this one right here is Colombia. Colombia and Venezuela are in South America. When you click on the link that I made for you to play the game, the Cetera game, to practice all of these, Colombia and Venezuela will not be on the game. Cetera wouldn't let me put a South American country on there. But I put them on this map because if you are going to be looking at and studying Central America, I want you to know where it connects to South America. I want you to know this is us, this is America, this is Colombia, and Venezuela is right next to it. So Colombia and Venezuela are both countries that will show up again on your South America map when we study that. But they also connect to Central America. Venezuelans have been in the news this week. Anybody been listening? Anybody have any idea what I'm talking about?
Border control?
It's just sadness.
You are, who said that?
Me?
Border control, okay.
That's in Mexico.
Oh, exactly. So from Venezuela, people who are leaving Venezuela is just falling apart as a nation. They implemented socialism, and a very bad kind of socialism, and their country is really just completely falling apart with both violence and economic problems. And so people who were trying to flee a really disastrous kind of situation in Venezuela, many of them have come up through Central America to try to get into our country right here at the border of what state? Texas. Right here at the border of Texas. So if you ever listen to the news, you might have heard that there's a lot of debate going on about immigration and who we allow into our country.
Why don't they just go down? Like down farther into South America?
Because of opportunities. Because our opportunities are a lot better than what they can get in most of those places. It's not, Venezuelans would not stop in Colombia because Colombia is a disaster too. And a lot of these countries are poverty stricken. They're extremely poor. When you come up here to Mexico, which is probably the most stable of all the Central American countries, it's still like drug cartels have massive power there. There's a lot of corruption in the government, and the economy it's like hanging on. It's okay, but not great. In fact, has anybody here ever been on a vacation off of Mexico and gone to a place like that? There's a lot of resorts here. They're cheap
I want to go to Cancun.
to go to.
Well, I've been to Dominican Republic.
Yeah, we'll get to Dominican Republic here. But if you've ever been, like Cancun is Mexico, right? So a lot of people, like they depend a lot on American tourist money because there are a lot of people who are really in hard places in these countries, and that's why they come to America. That's why they travel through Central America to try to get in to the border and try to come to America and work. And a lot of these people are like, well, let's say highly qualified educationally, but they'll take a job doing just really, really basic labor just because it's way better than what they can get in their own countries. So anyway, the reason the Venezuelans were just in the news is, did anybody hear anything about the governor of, what state is this? Florida, dropping a plane load of Venezuelans onto a really fancy rich island off the coast of Massachusetts called Martha's Vineyard? You guys listen to these at all?
No.
Ooh, that's not.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky because he was just trying to basically score political points, make this big point, like, oh, how about all you rich people up here? See what it's like to have immigrants. But unfortunately, on top of that being very much a political ploy, he tricked these people into getting onto the plane, most likely. They're having a class action lawsuit against him right now. Told them they were going to have all these great opportunities, and then dropped them on Massachusetts. Basically, it's political. It's like, you know, it's a crazy thing to do. Like, it was, when I heard of it, I was like, what? Martha's Vineyard is, I'll be surprised if any of you ever go there. It is a super fancy, rich place. It's like, be really cool. It's off of like Cape Cod, which is an amazing place to visit.
My uncle's from Cape Cod.
Yeah, Cape Cod's awesome. Martha's Vineyard is like where presidents go to vacation. Like, it's really high end. So to drop a plane load of Venezuelans who come from a really poverty-stricken place, who've come here seeking economic opportunity, to drop them onto Martha's Vineyard, it's just making a point. It's just like, haha, you know, you deal with this now. Yeah. All right, so back to, that was Venezuela. United States, you know, Cuba. All right, so now we're getting to the islands. The biggest of these islands is Cuba. The Bahamas are a whole bunch of islands right here. Do you see how it says number 13 on your map?
Yes. No.
The Bahamas are all these islands. There is one that's bigger than that. But if you know anyone who's been to the Bahamas, they usually go to Florida, and then from Florida to the Bahamas. Have you been?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you go straight from Richmond, or did you go to Florida first?
I'm pretty sure that
We went from
to
Baltimore.
Yeah. It's
It was
really close to Florida. Usually the planes hop. They just do a hop from Florida to the Bahamas.
It was a really long flight though, so it might not have.
It could have been. You're right. Jamaica is this island right here. Haiti. All right. So Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Do you see this one right here? This land. There's a line through the middle because it's two countries. Haiti is on the left. The Dominican Republic, the DR, is on the right. You were correct about baseball. There being a lot of Central American baseball. I want to add to that there's really good soccer in these areas of the world.
Football.
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 So there's some, even though these countries are tiny compared to America, in a lot of these countries, they just are, the whole country plays one sport. And if they all play soccer, or they all play baseball, then they can be pretty good. Haiti, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico. All right, Puerto Rico's an interesting one. Look at this one where the red dot is, Sutton and Audrey. This right here is Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is an American territory.
Yep.
It's a weird one because if you live in Puerto Rico, you're kind of an American citizen. You can vote in the presidential primaries for a Republican or Democrat, but you're not allowed to vote for president. There's all these you're halfway a citizen sort of things. Yes.
Isn't it
Called what? Yes. Or yes, Commonwealth territory. It's something that it's not a state. There's always debates over should it become a state, and it hasn't been. Puerto Rico. Now, three waters on your map. There's the little, I drew the little water things for those. This one, if you can almost draw a circle around it, is the Gulf of Mexico. This one right here, this entire thing is the Caribbean Sea, which reminds you of what movie?
Parts of the Caribbean.
That's right. And then this one, it says Atlantic Ocean, but you guys know the Atlantic Ocean goes all the way up here, all the way down here, all the way out here. The Atlantic Ocean's huge. Questions, Wesley? Okay. You can put that map away where maps go in your handout section and go straight to your cards because we have so much to talk about today with the American Revolution.
Yes.
This is fun stuff today.
She gave us homework, Mr. Oko, to go home and watch Hamilton.
Yes.
Terrible idea.
All right. The very first person you see on here, this fancy picture, is the King of England. And what you want to know about this guy is that he wanted to recover money spent on the French and Indian War by collecting taxes. All right, girls. Focus. Taxes. That is what you want to keep in mind is taxes. That's always about the taxes. Under him, the American Revolution started. What was his name, Avery?
King George III.
King George III. And this is right about the time that we need a little intro to our lesson,
Oh.
isn't it?
Yay.
Let's go! Yes! Yes!
Yes.
This guy spits all over his lips. It's gross.
Well, do you want to get up on stage and sing something like that too?
No, I'll give him an apple.
Okay. Everyone makes fun of him, but like it's kind of hard.
This
This is my favorite song.
The price of my love's not the price
That
that
you
you
obey.
say. You cry in your tears, you hurt the sea, and you see me go by. Why so sad? Remember we made an arrangement when you went away. Now you're making me mad. Remember, despite our estrangement, I'm your man. You'll be back, soon you'll see. You'll remember you belong to me. You'll be back, time will tell. You'll remember that I served you well. Oceans rise, empires fall. We have seen each other through it all. And when push comes to shove, I will send a fully armed battalion to remind you of my love.
Alright. Sorry we can't go on forever with Hamilton, but King George was in fact quite a character. And the key word for this lead up to the revolution was taxes. It's taxes, taxes, taxes. What did the British require of the American colonists in the Stamp Act? What were they asking them to do in the Stamp Act? You have your cards, you can look at them.
I got that one wrong though.
An answer.
Taxes, taxes, taxes. Garrett.
Legal papers.
They didn't make them give them legal papers. What did they make them do with these papers, Josh?
They made them pay taxes on legal papers such as marriage, license, college diplomas, and newspapers.
I told you it's all about taxes. It's taxes, taxes, taxes. And the way they made them pay taxes on all of this was they had to buy a stamp. This is actually a picture of one of the stamps that they had to buy right here. Because remember, we're close enough in history where we have artifacts of all this stuff. So we're getting, just wait, we will soon and very soon be to the point where we will be able to watch on video the stuff that we're studying about. That's super cool. Right now we can't do that. We can't actually see the Revolutionary War on video, but we can see actual stamps. No. All right. Now, the Stamp Act was repealed because the colonists hated it. But Britain did not give up. They just put some new taxes on. What are the taxes, Audrey? With the Townshend Acts. What were the taxes with the Townshend Acts?
Taxes on like all the British goods.
Yes, like what? What are some examples? Ben. Nate. Sorry.
Glass, tea, paint, paper, and lead.
Yes. All sorts of British goods. Now, do you guys remember I told you when we talked about mercantilism, I told you that the colonies had to buy stuff from the mother country, right? Remember I said that? That's how the mother country made its money. They have to buy it back. However, Sutton, focus. However, guess what Britain couldn't make them do? They could say you can't buy them from France, but they couldn't keep them from
The British.
not buying them at all, or just making it themselves. So this was, if you've heard the word boycott, this was a big boycott. The colonists said, we're not buying your stuff, Britain. You put a tax on it, not buying it. Boycott. The colonists were mad about this. They were mad that the king was making them pay for his war. They were mad that they were having to pay taxes without having any of their own people represent them where? Where would they get represented? Yeah, what was the government of England? Represented in the Parliament. Right. Now, Benjamin Franklin did go visit Parliament, but he was not a representative. All right, let's do a summary of all the tax things by watching this video.
The highly unpopular Stamp Act, imposed on the colonies by the British Parliament, was repealed due to stiff resistance and organized boycotts. American colonists cheered the news, even erecting statues of King George III and other British leaders. Yet, George III and many members of Parliament wanted the colonists to pay for damages caused by rioting and the price of printing millions of now worthless stamps. How did Parliament react? One of the colonists' most effective voices of resistance was Benjamin Franklin, who had been sent to London to speak on their behalf. Franklin stated that he no longer considered himself English, but American. He even introduced himself in the House of Commons as Franklin of Philadelphia. Pressure from Franklin helped repeal the unpopular and impractical Stamp Act, but Franklin noted in letters to friends that Parliament was far from done with attempting to impose its will on what many in London referred to as our subjects in America. Parliament was indeed determined to tax the colonies, and in 1767 it passed an ambitious series of laws that became known as the Townshend Acts, named in honor of Charles Townshend, an advisor to King George III. They suspended New York's assembly for refusing to take in British troops, and the legislature was not allowed to assemble again until they agreed to meet the needs of the soldiers. The laws placed taxes on glass, paper, lead, paint, and tea, and colonists were required to pay in gold or silver. The revenue from the taxes would pay the salaries of troops and officers that the colonists were already providing housing and supplies for under the Quartering Act. Another section called for writs of assistance to stop smuggling. This gave British authorities the right to search any building or vessel for any reason. No warrant was needed, and colonists immediately objected, stating that nothing would stop authorities from abusing this power. In February of 1768, Bostonian Sam Adams, leader of the Sons of Liberty, wrote a letter arguing that these laws violated the rights of the colonists. Adams was the driving force behind boycotting British goods, and the letter was sent to other colonial legislatures who joined in the protest. The boycott spread through the colonies, and trade with Britain once again grinded to a halt. The Sons of Liberty also organized protests, secret societies, and committees of correspondence to communicate with one another and harass British activities. An offshoot of this program was the Daughters of Liberty, who held spinning bees to create American-made clothes that enabled colonists to avoid British imports. Perhaps the most famous instance of British authorities enforcing the Townshend Acts came when customs officials attempted to inspect a sloop, cleverly named Liberty, for smuggled goods. John Hancock, the owner of the sloop and the wealthiest man in New England, was a Bostonian who made his fortune smuggling illegal glass, lead, paper, wine, rum, molasses, and tea. When customs officials attempted to seize the vessel, a riot broke out. The mob became so violent that British officials had to flee. In response, the governor broke up the Massachusetts legislature and asked that British troops be sent in to help restore order. Once again, the boycotts and other forms of colonial resistance proved effective, as most of the Townshend Acts were repealed. These laws cost Britain £170,000 to attempt to enforce, yet they only brought in a measly £295. In an effort to make a point, George III declared that the tax on tea would remain in place. To deal with the unruly mobs in Boston, the first British soldiers arrived in the city in October of 1768.
Oh. All right. So you'll see with that, taxes, 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 it's all about taxes. But when the thing that was called the Boston Massacre happened, why? Why did this happen? Wesley. Right. So they threw snowballs. The colonists threw snowballs. They threw some rocks. The British were sort of threatening them back with guns, and somebody fired. A couple people fired. 3 people were killed. Now, is that actually a massacre? No. The reason this was called a massacre is because of a really good public relations campaign. We'll say a media campaign that could be called some of the original war propaganda, done by somebody that you guys know, that you've heard of, Paul Revere. Paul Revere took a picture that was drawn by somebody who may or may not have been there. It doesn't really matter. But it was a picture that does not realistically represent what happened. And he had it engraved, and prints of this spread all over the colonies in order to make colonists feel what? Scared, unhappy, mad, unlucky, all those answers. Those are good. So he was doing that. I'm going to cut the lights off. I want you to look at this picture and tell me what in this picture is designed to manipulate your emotions to make you dislike the British and feel sorry for the colonists. Ben?
Nate?
All right, anybody want to answer? What is designed? Yes. Nate?
Thank you. Well, they're all shooting, and everyone looks like they kept shooting at them.
Yep.
It was like the second round.
Yes, exactly. That's a great point. It looks like they've shot multiple rounds and they're lined up for battle. What else do you notice, Linda?
And also it looks like they're all unarmed.
Yes, it looks like the colonists did nothing to make this happen.
The
Garrett?
colonists are trying to get them to stop. See how that they're putting their hands out to tell them to stop?
Yes, exactly. Josh?
It's a
Poor dog over there in the corner.
Yes, the dog is part of it.
I'm not really sorry for the colonists. I'm just like,
The dog's
The
poor.
dog.
as long as the
dog's
dog's
like-
alive.
I mean, priority
Well, the
is-
dog in a picture represents fidelity or faithfulness. Whose side is the dog on?
The colonists.
The colonist side. The dog's not hanging out with the British. The dog is on the colonist side.
My dog
What
would be
else do you
British.
notice about their faces? What do you notice about their faces?
All of them look angry.
They're smiling.
Nate?
Yeah, they're
Happy
pretty.
that
Yeah,
they're shooting.
yeah.
Exactly.
They're
They
making
look
them
like
the
they
bad
are
guys.
enjoying shooting. Even shooting at this guy's back. Now, do you see any written words on the buildings above?
No.
There was one that says butcher.
There's one that says butcher. And what does it mean? We know what a butcher is. But what
Chopping
does it
meat.
mean if you use that word butcher?
They're gonna butcher the people that are.
Yes. So
Actually
even
chop 'em
that,
up.
he's trying to make your eyes subconsciously go, oh, they're butchering us.
I could barely.
It's propaganda. This is propaganda. All to turn the sentiments against the British and toward the colonists. Yes.
They butchered the story.
Yes,
And
they
butcher
did butcher the story a
They
little
butcher
bit.
the dog.
All right, so what after this? Remember, it's always about taxes. It's always about taxes. What did the British do that resulted in these people that were running the Sons of Liberty dumping tea into the Boston Tea Party? Harper?
They removed the import tax on British tea.
Yeah, they did what?
Removed.
Well, they removed all of the taxes
But
except that one. So it's almost right. Just they removed the taxes, all those township taxes. They removed all of them except that. Remember that King George singing that song? This was King George saying, "You all are bad. You are naughty little children. I'll remove the taxes, but you are still gonna pay one on tea because I'm the king here, and you will do what I say." You know, and so he left the one on tea, even though it barely made them any money. Almost no money at all. The British spent so much money.
Just lose money.
Yes. So what they did is they wanted the British wanted to make sure they kept buying tea, so they made it super cheap. Like basically every other place is going to be expensive tea, but our tea is going to be so cheap. Nate?
And they had a monopoly on tea, so no one else could keep up with them. So then it was cheap, and there was a bunch of it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Very good. Yes. Yes. All right. I just wanted to remind you, this was in a video, but I wanted you to see it with your own eyes because it's so striking. It cost Britain 170,000 pounds. Pounds is like money. In order to enforce all of these taxes, and they only made 295 pounds off of it.
That's like
Doesn't make any sense.
you can buy a hoodie for $2.95.
Not $2.95, $295, but
You can buy
still.
a hoodie for
They made
$2.95.
almost nothing off of it, and they spent so much money trying to prove that they were in charge. Just to make a point, he left the tax on tea, even everything else was repealed. All right, so then the colonists met together for the first time ever in their Continental Congress. What did they discuss? Two things, two problems they were discussing. Josh, Clayton, flip your cards and stay with us.
No taxation
On the right.
without representation, and to boycott all trade with England and to make militias out of the colonies.
Well, yes, but you missed one thing related to the Boston Tea Party that they were discussing at this meeting.
They closed the Boston Harbor to all trade business.
Right. So Britain had enforced closing the Boston Harbor, and they were like, actually, this is going to kill the Boston economy. Like, we've got to have the harbor open. And also they talked about no taxation without representation. Because they wanted to have representatives in Parliament. Okay. This is Richmond, Virginia. We have a little bit of Revolutionary War right here. If you go up to Church Hill, on the top of Church Hill is a church called St. John's Church. Audrey, who was it who fired up the delegates up there? Patrick Henry. Yes.
So a couple years back in my old school, we had to do like a report on like a history on American Revolutionary people. I did Patrick Henry.
I wrote it.
And there was like a speech that like I like to do a speech that he made.
Yes.
I did that speech. I
Oh,
was,
that's so awesome.
I was like 10, and we had to like dress up like him, and I had to get like a red and blue.
If you ever would like to see a historical reenactor do this speech all summer long, every summer, all summer long on Sunday afternoons, you can go to St. John's Church at the top of Richmond, Virginia. This is what it looks like.
I've been there.
It's just at the top of Church Hill. And you go there and they have the reenacting of this particular speech.
Every Sunday?
Every Sunday afternoon in the summertime, not right now. This is what it looks like on the inside, and they have dressed up characters doing what Josh got a chance to do when he was there. Giving the whole famous "Give me liberty or give me death" speech. All right, so Paul Revere and others, they were zooming through the night to tell people that, Nate, what message?
The British are coming.
Okay, and
Advancing.
what?
They were advancing.
Yeah. But also they were trying to warn the Sons of Liberty to hide all their gunpowder, because they weren't going to have anything left to like fight with if the British advanced and took all of their gunpowder. All right. The British had troops. Keep that piece of paper I gave you out and at hand because we're about to get to that. The British had troops.
I didn't get one.
Clayton just didn't give it to you. The British had troops in same. Elijah, you gotta pass that over to Wesley. The British had troops. They did have a continental army, but the colonists had militia. Harper, what's a militia?
An emergency army made up of citizens.
Exactly. what kinds of people are going to be fighting in a militia?
Men.
Men, yes. In fact, every man from the age of 16 all the way up to the age of 60 was required to train every month in the militia. Although, whether or not they trained, they might have just gotten together to have like a social gathering. But they were required to be in the militia. They were all required to own a gun, and they were required to be ready to fight. It was shopkeepers, farmers. It was people protecting their own towns, their own homes. They were voluntary, they were not paid, and so they could drop out whenever they wanted to.
Well,
They often would only fight in around their own homes. So that's why the colonists also needed to have an army. The Continental Army, they were the ones that wore the uniforms, but the militia were just the regular old people. Okay, you guys all know, everybody can say it out loud. Who led the army?
George Washington.
George Washington. And anybody want to tell us what was the position at Bunker Hill and at Breeds Hill that let them put up such a strong fight, Wesley? Yeah, having that high ground and being able to put their cannons there really helped them because cannonballs get helped by gravity. It helps. Yes, Nate?
And it was a peninsula, so they knew exactly where the British were coming from.
Yes.
Ooh, look at those pines.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
It's true. All right, so I wanted to tell you a little bit about the soldiers, and we're gonna right now write down some different things about the. Y'all are gonna give me your ideas, and you're gonna write them on a piece of paper so that you have a list on the left of what were some of the strengths of the British, on the right some of the strengths of the colonists. You are supposed to be listening and writing stuff on the piece of paper. These are the British. They wore red coats. But guys, there's a reason they wore red coats. When they shot the flintlock rifles, they had to close their eyes to shoot them because it made this explosion of gunpowder. And just like that Paul Revere engraving, it was a lot of smoke. The red stood out in a crowded battlefield so that they knew who was on their own side, so they wouldn't bayonet their own men and kill each other. So the red coats were on purpose because of the kind of guns they used back in those days. Isn't that interesting? Yes?
It was also to put a big target on the back so people wouldn't stab them in the neck.
Well, it was so that their own people didn't stab them.
Well, but
Yes.
it also made it easier to
The guns had a bayonet there on the end, which was like a point, like shove in, twist, and pull it back out. That was how you use the bayonet. Now, these are the British soldiers. This right here is the Continental Army. He has a uniform because he was a paid soldier for the colonies. But this guy just has on regular clothes because he's not on the Continental Army. He is militia. He's just a farmer or a shopkeeper who's doing his job of protecting his little own homeland. Okay, for your list, you guys give me some ideas of what were the strengths of the British side.
numbers,
A lot more people, good. What else?
funding, and arms.
Yes, in general, they had a lot more gear, a lot more stuff. Write this stuff down, Clayton. You're writing on your list. Ideas that y'all are brainstorming. What else? What were some of the relative strengths of the British?
They had better weapons.
Better weapons, good.
Better training.
Better training. They were professionals. You might want to put that down. They were actually trained to fight. This was not their first time. What else was the strength of the British?
They had skilled generals.
Yes, exactly. A lot of experience, military mindset. They've done this a lot. Something that I don't think students are going to think of, so I'll just tell you this, is they had warships. They had ships, a ton of ships. And the colonies didn't really have warships and didn't have that many ships. But the British needed them because what were they doing with ships? What did they have to do, even if you didn't fight on the seas?
Carry men.
Carry men from
Britain.
From Britain,
Yeah.
right? I mean, Britain's kind of a ways away. So they had to actually bring not just men, but all of their
Food.
they had their supplies, their food and stuff, unless they were going to get it from the colonists. But why would the colonists sell them this stuff? They had to import all of their stuff they needed. And if they ever needed to make a decision, could they call up Parliament and ask for permission?
No.
What did they have to do?
They had to go back.
Boats and go back and ask for permission. So it was sort of a long supply line. All right, what about the Americans? Go to the other side. What were some of the relative strengths of that the colonies had?
It was home turf.
Home turf. That's a huge one. This is our land. We're fighting for our land. Josh?
They can blend in because they're not red, they're blue. They can just like.
Especially the what? Who can
militia.
especially the militia. It was hard to even tell they were soldiers. So if the British were trying to be like, oh, who are we fighting against? The militia were just they just disappeared right back to the farms, right back into their shops. They could be like, we're not fighting, even if they were.
They just pull out just.
They were on high.
They were on higher ground sometimes. So, and in general, what about the whole ground? What was it about the surroundings that was better for the colonists?
Well, they knew their surroundings, but they also had motivation because it was their home.
Yes, and yes, they knew their surroundings, especially, again, the militia. It was literally their land. Are you guys writing this stuff down? It was their land. They knew everything. They knew where the bridges were. They knew where the water was. They knew where the best hiding places were. It was their land, and they really, really wanted to protect it. They were motivated. Ben?
Also,
I mean,
it was really rough, and the British were used to fighting on just big, flat fields.
Yes. Yes. All right, so moving on to the guns part. You don't have to fill out the stuff at the bottom there. I wanted to tell you that what they used was flintlock rifles. Flintlock guns. Flintlock muskets were different than rifles. When you say something is rifled, you mean it has these grooves in it that makes the bullet spin. Look at this.
Threaded barrel.
If it spins, you can aim it. But the flintlock, no aim. They couldn't aim. That's why they fought in lines. They would just shoot, generally shoot, until it's like some people started to die and then they would all charge with their bayonets. Point, turn, shove. That was the way the fighting worked. It also took, to load a weapon, if you were really good at it, it would take 20 seconds. You could do
My name is Alex.
3 a
a
minute. So the fastest you can imagine loading would be in 20 seconds. So he's showing you how the gun is done. You have to bite off the powder, pour some in there, and then you pour others on the top of it. The ball, the metal ball, is also inside of this cartridge. They made their own metal balls out of like pots and stuff. They just melted stuff down and made balls. Then they had to take out that rammer and ram it down. It takes a lot of time, and this whole time,
Nowadays you just had to pull like a little.
the whole time what's happening while they're doing this, what's happening? They're being shot at. So I want you to think for a minute about what it would be like to have somebody shooting at you while you are reloading. This is 20 seconds. Listen to what the sounds of battle. This whole time you're reloading. That whole time you were reloading. Isn't that crazy to imagine? You have to do it in the middle of the chaos of battle. All right, 2 more cards. Common Sense, this influential book by Thomas Paine. Don't pack up when we're going over our last 2 cards. We're so close to finish. He wrote about liberty, the purpose of government. Guys, there was a lot of printing that was happening in the colonies at this time, which meant that the printed word was very influential. Thomas Paine wrote stuff like this. Look with your eyeballs. From the errors of other nations, let us learn wisdom. Time makes more converts than reason. And see if you can follow what he's saying here about small islands, like Britain. Small islands, not capable of protecting themselves, are the proper objects for kingdoms to take under their care. But there is something absurd in supposing that a continent, us, should be governed by an island. Britain. All right, the reason I put this last card in here is because I want you to be familiar with the language of the Declaration of Independence. Read it with me out loud. It is read it with me, self-evident that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is what the Declaration of Independence looks like. Wait, guys. You have to wait a minute anyway before you can go. This is what the Declaration of Independence looks like, and you'll notice John Hancock is the big signature here at the bottom. These are people that signed it. The whole thing is just basically saying King George
Go.
is just wrong. All right, it's 55. You guys can go.